Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar with Real Story Group. Super exciting topic today that we're going to discuss AI agents and the future of your MarTech stack. We are seeing things about AI agents everywhere, so we're here to make some sense for you in that regard and what that means to you as a MarTech leader moving forward. So we've got our CEO and founder, Tony Byrne, with us today, along with our VP of Research and Advisory, Apoorv Durga. So should be a fast-paced, quick-moving 30 minutes together, but we will have time at the end for questions. So if you do have any questions, you can enter those into the GoToWebinar control panel. And then we will be sending these slides out within the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. And for our subscribers online, as always, you will be able to access a recording of today's presentation in your subscriber library. So please keep an eye out for that and the rest of the webinars that we've done over the past several months. As we get started, I do see a lot of new names in a list today, so welcome. If you're not familiar with Real Story Group, here's a little bit of background about us. We've been at this now for 24 years, and the name that we have is really part and parcel to who we are as an organization. We're going to tell you the real story about MarTech vendors and what they do well, but maybe more importantly, what they don't do so well, what their limitations are. Okay, so we're not going to pat somebody on the back because they subscribe to our research or anything like that. We're not going to do any work for any vendors we cover in any way, shape, or form. Our goal is to sit on your side of the table and make sure you're making the right technology choices for your specific needs. And so we really evaluate these vendors very critically. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tony and Apoorv to take you through today's special presentation on AI agents. So guys, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. So many of you know at Real Story Group, we start out as a vendor evaluation firm. That's still very heavily what we do. This subway map shows all the different vendors that we evaluate across 10 key marketplaces. Of course, a big issue is with the intersections, not just with respect to vendors, but with respect to what does your stack look like. And so increasingly over the years, we've been advising large enterprises in their overall stack strategy. And earlier this year, we started evaluating AI for marketing vendors. So that's the light green line on here. And a lot of really interesting conversations really helped us help you make some good technology choices. And then, of course, the whole agent revolution came upon us. And what was interesting about that is that it's a whole different set of vendors. So we're going to be actually adding a new line to this subway map next month. So super excited to be previewing some of that for you here today. Agents is such an interesting space because you know that it's still very much in the hype phase of the overall hype cycle. And certainly a lot of vendors are way out in front of at least what we see among our subscribers. But we still have some decent line of sight into what could be here. And so that's what's super exciting, of course. The reality is, how do you get there? And can you leap some levels of maturity? And what are ultimately the benefits relative to what could be some significant costs and risks? So super exciting topic, really great to get into it today. Of course, there's a lot of FOMO here. And a lot of vendors and a lot of consultants who are pretending to be futurists who are saying, if you don't get in on agents, you're going to miss out. And the reality is that you need to build some of the same muscle that you need to build to be effective with AI, even more so with agents. And in fact, if you don't really have an effective AI strategy and some competencies, leaping forward to agencies, you'll find out it's really going to be a mistake. And so the good news is that from a stack perspective, we will make a lot of the same observations that we would make about, I hate to call it plain vanilla AI, but certainly, more traditional AI versus agentic AI. But a lot of the stack issues are the same. So that's what we're going to start today. I'm going to talk about some core reference models and what are some stack paradigms that we have here. And then my colleague Apoorv is going to take over and talk about AI agent use cases. So we've identified 9 categories of use cases at Real Story Group. We're big believers in use cases, both with respect to evaluating vendors, but also helping you identify business value. And then that naturally takes us to the agent AI vendor landscape, super interesting topic. And then we'll wrap up with some conclusions and how we can help you going forward. So those of you who have been with us for a while know that this is the overall reference architecture that we have been using for the past several years. It is a layered architecture that presupposes you have an ever increasing number of engagement channels up at the top of your screen, various interaction and delivery environments in between, and then in a layer, the first colored layer, are engagement services. So that's really where you have platforms that are interacting at the glass with your customers. A lot of us have spent a lot of time beefing up those engagement services, particularly in the 2010s. Now, in the 2020s, we really need to focus on the bottom stack, which is the enterprise customer foundation services. And there's really three pillars to that: content and information, data, and decisioning. So these are basically decoupled from your engagement environments. That allows you to scale, importantly allows you to go omni-channel. And that's really where we believe in those the three legs of that stool is where you have generative AI, insights AI, and decisioning AI working on top of some of these customer foundation platforms. So then how do we then dive kind of more deeply into that AI layer? So this is our next reference model, which is really showing you a number of different things here. Again, the diverse engagement services. Then we kind of blow out the AI piece here. And there's several things to say about this. First is, we have these key enterprise sort of governance and control issues that are really critical. And if you're not paying attention to those, it can be very difficult to get beyond the pilot stage. So actually these sorts of capabilities on the right that some of us might think of as downers are actually really enablers. The other thing that's really critical here, what we call foundational capabilities. A lot of these are enterprise ops capabilities that are really important to underpinning the sorts of things that you want to do. So you really want to partner with with some of your enterprise colleagues who are working on some of these foundational capabilities. And then we've also learned that these foundational platforms are really critical with respect to data, decisioning and personalization, and certainly content. That having this store of proprietary content and data is really critical for you to differentiate in the AI world. And so a lot of our subscribers are really thinking hard about the ownership of that and the way that they deploy those in private or custom LLMs. Then we get into, as I mentioned before, insights and decisioning and generative AI. We tend to think that generative AI is kind of downstream from the other two, but the important thing is to really think about these in the context of specific use cases, right? It's the use cases that drive business value, and it's the use cases that help you align against particular vendor capabilities. But I want to point your attention here to what's happening at the engagement service layer, which is that all these vendors from CRM, Salesforce, social media, outbound marketing, web content management, e-commerce, they're all telling you that they've got AI baked into their platforms. The problem with that is that, first of all, it may not be compliant, and second of all, it's very tactical. It is something that can be also very siloed within your organization and can also turn out to be rather expensive. So it's interesting to pilot, but we really believe that AI should be handled more as a layer. And so at that layer, again, key use cases drive it, but and insights probably at the foundation of this. But I'd like to talk over to the left today, since that's what we're focused on, is agentic AI. And there's really two categories of use cases there at a high level. One is workflow automation, and the other is stack orchestration. So workflow automation is something you do within a platform. And so most of the agents that you see out there coming from vendors, that's what they do. Stack orchestration is actually being able to apply agents across platforms to do full cycle sort of work. So when people talk about, an agentic briefing cycle or an agentic win-back campaign that closes the loop, whoever's going to show you some of those, that's really around stack orchestration. Much more in our future, much more complicated, much more difficult to pull off, much more security vulnerable, but much more valuable. So we'll talk about a little bit about that in the future. So what does Agent AI do? Just to backtrack here a little bit and deal with some foundations, it's automating and sequencing tasks either within a platform, in which case it's workflow, or across your stack, in which case it's orchestration. Now the key thing here, and of course what everyone gets excited about, is that you without needing human input at every step. And it acts as an independent goal system with real-time data. And then nominally, you have some machine learning here where you can plan, adapt, take action, improve. So it becomes kind of self improvement. So it gets beyond the sort of more static decision making that you see within AI, and it introduces these notions of autonomy and adaptability and self improvement, which is of course what we're all looking to do. It's just that it's hard in our human mediated multi-platform world. So as we think about agents, then it's really critical, once again, to break it down into specific business use cases. And that's particularly important when you'll see what Apoorv is going to do here in a bit later, which is to map this against actual vendor capabilities. So Apoorv, why don't you take it away here?
Thank you, Tony. So in most cases, agents don't replace your existing use cases. They extend them. Like Tony just mentioned, think of it this way. You already have systems for insights, decisioning, and generation AI, or generative AI. Agents inject autonomy, memory, goal seeking, and those kinds of behaviors into the same silos. But having said that, sometimes agents do unlock new use cases, particularly the ones that cut across those silos, which is the cross-stack agents that we saw in the previous slide. Right. So instead of isolated tasks, you get feedback-driven systems that evolve over time. We sometimes call this agentic flywheel because every cycle makes the system smarter. We'll look at some examples in the following slides. So in the next slide, we categorize the agents into 9 scenario categories, 9 scenarios. So as some of you might know, at RSG, we use business cases or scenarios to understand vendors and products. Now, there are 9 scenarios shown on this slide that we have identified across the MarTech landscape. So these are AI in marketing landscape, AI in marketing domain, right? So these are based on real client demand and not vendor wish listing, wish casting, right? So to be fair, these are abstractions and your own use cases will likely be some combination or hybrid of these. So we categorize these 9 scenarios or use cases into 3 categories. The first category is insight acceleration. That consists of scenarios related to insights and analytics and things like that. The second category is engagement enhancements, where we club scenarios related to personalization, engagement, activation, orchestration, and so on. And finally, in the support and process improvement category, we club scenarios related to content workflow automation and other process related things. What's important here is that each of these scenarios represent a domain where agentic behavior can actually create some genuine lift, right? And again, across all these 9 scenarios, the question is the same. Are your agents reasoning or are they just relabeled automation, right? Because if all they do is fetch, forward, and fetch, format, and forward, then all you have is sort of an Excel macro. So let me give you a flavor. In this slide, we see 2 examples of how agentic AI has added over traditional AI, right? So in the first row, you will have a simple use case, which is leveraging customer intelligence. Essentially, in the traditional way, you would typically run a batch analysis of scoring after the fact. However, agent AI makes it more dynamic. So it listens to CRM updates in real time. It enriches those attributes, create new attributes if required, and triggers decisions immediately. By the way, we have an agenticity model with 4 levels that define how agentic something is, rather than whether or not it is agentic. We talked about our agenticity model in a previous webinar that you are welcome to check out from our website. So in this case, we categorize row 1 as a reactive agent, which is category 2 or level 2, mostly used in workflow automation. It gives you faster time to value from data you already have and so on. The second row is essentially a more advanced version of the first row, a more advanced use case. And it is an example of how agent AI adds to traditional AI for stack orchestration type use cases, where you need much more sophistication in terms of autonomy, adaptability, and so on. Right. So the key point here is that agent AI is not always necessary. It only shines when the use case needs orchestration, autonomy, flexible tool usage, and so on and so forth. So let's look at the AI marketplaces. No, we have a few examples before that. Okay, so this is an example of a workflow type of use case. This is our first use case called customer and prospect intelligence. So if you recall, there were three types of AIs: insight AI, decisioning AI, and generative AI. In this use case, it shows how agentic AI is used within a silo or within a particular element of your stack, right? So here you have two tasks, both within Insights AI. The first task gets some data from audience and customer insights. So essentially get some customer uh, or prospect segments or insights about those segments. And then based on that, the second step helps you do some sort of predictive analysis or forecasting or something, so things of that nature. And between the two steps, you have human in the loop at key junctures, right? So this is just a two-step model, but essentially the idea is that you are using agentic AI to automate a workflow within a subset of your stack and not across the stack. The second example in the next slide is in contrast to this, right? So this is an example orchestration. This is an example of reactivating an agent for dormant HVCs, right? So you can see here that it's a 6-step process that spans your stack, right? So you get something from Insights AI, feed it into decisioning AI, go back to Insights AI, and eventually do something with generative AI to create messaging or personalization and so on and so forth, right? So these are not serial in any serial order. They could be in parallel, they could feed into each other and so on and so forth. The main idea here is that there are parallel agents or parallel steps and that span across your stack, uh, trying to orchestrate the stack. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the AI marketplace, AI vendor landscape. The first one, just to refresh, before we go deeper into agent AI, we are taking a step back here and looking at our AI for marketing marketplace. This is our current view of AI for marketing, right? So there are 4 categories here, the left box to right box. You have the foundation models, you have the insights oriented tools, traditional analytics, segmentation, etc. You have the decisioning oriented tools, things like optimization engines and next best action, think Pega, Salesforce, etc. And finally, you have the generative AI category, where you have tools like Jasper and Perplexity, and then creative engines like Midjourney and Runway. Now, most enterprise stacks already use a bit of these, all 4: insights, decisioning, and Gen AI. But here's the catch, right? They are all siloed. They are for only specific purposes. And that's where agentic AI comes into play. It starts to rewire your stack. Uh, Underneath, it might use some of these tools, but it goes beyond that. So you will see in our next slide that the agentic AI vendors are completely separate from this. There is very little overlap, except for some of the foundational models here, right? So this slide describes the agent AI marketplace as we see it today, right? So you will see that it's no longer about models or use cases, but how you assemble, deploy, and scale agents, right? So the first category here is what we call closed CX ecosystems, right? So these are Salesforce, ServiceNow, SAP, HubSpot, etc. They are essentially embedding agents into their own platform, right? So tight controls, strong integration, walled gardens. You are logged into their world. Our colleague Scott wrote about how Salesforce walled garden and their agent force. So you can have a look at that post, and it provides a lot more details about these kinds of agent ecosystem. The second category is what we call agent composition frameworks, right? So here you will see two divisions. On the top are LLM agnostic frameworks, right? So they are like LangChain, AutoGen, Crew AI, etc. These are platforms for building multi-agent systems. So they give you a lot of flexibility, but often require a lot of engineering muscle and patience. At the bottom in the same box, you will see the LLM specific composition framework. So almost all the foundational models have their own agentic framework. So Amazon has it, Google Agent Development Kit has it, and so does OpenAI Agent SDK. Cloud, etc. also have it. The third category is what we call configurable builders. They are aimed more at business users, right? So products like Relevance, Mind Studio, Auto, N8, and others, they provide building blocks for agent creation without deep code. Now, more usable, less flexible. Having said that, for almost all complex use cases, you will eventually end up writing code in spite of what those vendors claim. But the fact is that they are relatively more user friendly than the category that we saw earlier. And finally, you have the RPA plus agentic layer. Here we look at tools like UiPath and Pega. Now, these are the tools that started in the rules-based automation and BPM world, and then they have bolted on agent behavior on top of their process engines or BPM capabilities, right? So on the one hand, they give you more sophisticated process and those kinds of capabilities. On the other hand, they are like legacy. They are not like native agentic AI capabilities, right? So you might now ask, which one should you bet on, right? So that really depends on three things. What is the level of autonomy you need? What is your stack orchestration, etc., and those kinds of things. So main thing here is that they are not plug and play yet, right? And this is an example of how we evaluate the agent AI platform. So this is really a sneak peek from our research that we are releasing pretty soon. In this case, this is an evaluation of Crew AI, right? So on the left hand side, you will see that we evaluate these products against the 9 scenarios that I mentioned, right? So there is a rating, and why that product is what the rating shows, right? So in this case, for example, Crew AI is really, it really shines when it comes to orchestration and decisioning, right? So delegating tasks to other sub agents and doing that kind of stuff. On the right side, you see the evaluation against what we call strategic factors, right? So these are non-functional criteria, but vendor specific, right? So we believe that vendor specific considerations are as important as the scenarios, right? So here we evaluate things like community strength and viability and observability, transparency, and some of those other factors, right? So we go into ratings and analysis of why that rating is what it is. Okay, so here's really the final quick takeaways before I hand it over to Tony, right? So there is a lot of hype right now. Everybody is talking of agent AI and making tall claims, etc., right? So the idea here is to develop an agent AI strategy based on your own use cases and not vendor demos, because usually vendor demos are really like simple and shiny and all of that, but when it comes to business or your own use cases, they will often need a lot of work, right? So in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to identify the right technology partners, right? So we saw the 4 categories. which one of them should you bet on? That's a tricky question because all of them have different capabilities. This is where we can help. We can help you select the right technology partners, right vendors, etc. Once you've decided on the partners or vendors, before you actually do a big bang implementation, you need to be able to prototype it quickly and then pivot to code, which means that you will need to involve your marketers to create the initial sketch or the process and then hand it over to your engineers for doing more sophisticated implementation, taking care of guardrails, masking PII and so on. Most of these products are very opaque about their pricing. Pricing totally depends on tokens, etc. Right? So that's an important consideration before you actually go deep down, right? So it's important to configure your ceilings and get alerts with respect to your costing so that you don't get sticker shocks or you don't get runway bills, and there are all kinds of stories about that. You should do mandatory red team reviews, which means things like prompt injection and data leaks and testing all of that. And finally, just treat no code like Excel macros, right? They are really good for quick and ad hoc or quick and dirty tasks, but once you go reckless with them, they can be a nightmare for your IT.
Yeah, thanks, Apoorv. I think one kind of meta takeaway from all that too is you will need engineers if you're serious about this. Of course, vendors are going to tell you that this is low code, no code, but that's especially if you want to do any kind of cross-platform orchestration. You will definitely need engineers with traditional engineering talents and traditional engineering workflows to really succeed here and add value. So, how can we help you? Of course, we'd love to help you. There's different ways that we can help you. One will be vendor evaluations. If you've worked with us, we have a platform called Real Quadrant where you input which scenarios are important for you, which strategic considerations do you prioritize more, and then it generates a custom quadrant for you. You can test this out. Of course, if you're a subscriber, the vendor names start lighting up, and then you can click right through to the deep vendor evaluations of the kind that Apoorv showed. And then, of course, we literally wrote the book on technology selection using design thinking. We've already working with some large enterprises on their AI choices here. Can certainly help you in the agentic realm as well. Just want to, maybe put your mind at ease here, though, that if you do this traditional crawl, walk, run, the vast majority of enterprises we work with, and we work with some of the most largest and sophisticated enterprises in the world, are really at the crawl phase, or maybe not even, they might be standing, and that's okay. Like, I think that we're still at a kind of a prototyping phase here, honestly. There's for sure, there's value ahead, but my hope is that coming out of this webinar, you're not feeling like you're behind, because you're probably not. So, there definitely is a crawl, walk, run here, and we would be happy to help you figure out what the real value is and where you should be making your investments, rather than a bunch of sort of scattershot tactical prototypes. We've got an audit and readiness assessment that we can lay out for you. Part of it is interactive, part of it is analytical, and help you develop a playbook where you can accelerate reasonably into this new phenomenon. And the key word there, of course, is reasonably and in a cost-effective way. So we will be releasing our agent vendor evaluations for I think it's about 24 vendors later this August. If you're already a full stack subscriber, that will show up right away in your library. Otherwise, Scott can share some details with you on how to stay in touch. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, we're already getting some in GoToWebinar. If you have any questions at all, please put yours in the queue, and Apoorv and I'll be happy to get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys, for such a great presentation. And thanks, everyone, for coming to today's webinar. As Tony mentioned, that research will be coming available next month. And if you'd like to be notified on when that is ready, you can email us, email me directly. It's explore@realstorygroup.com. realstorygroup.com, the coordinates you see there. And one other thing I just wanted to point out real quickly on the theme of AI, we're going to be having another webinar in 2 weeks, August 13th. That one will take a look at benchmarking your AI effectiveness, something we've been talking a lot about recently with our subscribers and with our MarTech Leadership Council. So we'll be bringing those findings to the table during that conversation in 2 weeks. With that, I have seen a couple of questions come through, and I'll turn things back to you guys.
Yeah, so Apoorv, we have a question from Ken. Without a doubt, clients should be embracing AI agent. It will become the norm. There's definite tangible value plays for sure. There are many moments in workflows and work streams where this can be applied and realized. Where it is suspect are bold claims made by companies like BrandTech and their platform Pencil, claiming how AI in the creative space is accelerating production 10x, 20x performance, etc. They are self-reported. In my experience, it is much more nuanced. Would you agree with such? Yes, I mean, nuance is actually being kind of generous. When Adobe tried to accelerate their creative process, using their own platform, they found out it was actually a wash. Now that was granted one, 6-week sort of lunge that they did, but they figured out that their agency not using AI and agentic tools could have done the same creative process for about the same price in the same time frame. So I think there are definitely some tactical wins here where companies are really trying to get to ROI is when they can thread these things together. Clearly, agents are going to have a role there. We're just not quite there yet. And so, that's why we're kind of paying close attention here, and in particular, trying to help our clients sort of avoid missteps at this early stage. So Apoorv, Ken is asking, I saw you had... Yeah, sorry, you're gonna add
to that, Tony. First, one of the major claims that we saw while researching these products was in terms of how scalable these products are, right? And they often ended up reporting numbers for the underlying infrastructure. So, for example, for the Azure cloud layer or Azure Foundry, they would, cite the number of transactions. But in the real world, if you go and check GitHub and other places, you will see that almost all of them fail when the number of steps go beyond 4 or 5 levels, right? So it's important to understand their claims and the context of those claims, right? So they often do that, yeah.
Yeah, and in that high-value customer win-back, if you remember that beautiful orchestration flow that you had, that was 7 steps, right? But you need those 7 steps if you want to automate that whole process end to end. So yeah, thanks for that, Apoorv. So Ken's further asking, I saw you had ServiceNow. That was in our kind of closed CX ecosystem on the far left. I saw you had ServiceNow. Are you also including MoveWorks in that bucket? So I'm not familiar with MoveWorks. I'm guessing it's another CRM firm.
Yeah. So good call out, Ken, about MoveWorks. It would fit under the closed CX agent model. It is primarily aimed at IT support, HR, and internal ops. That's what I remember from when I saw it. So our focus in this edition was mostly to include products that focus on marketing in some way, right? But we always keep revising, and if our customers ask us for it, and if we see that product starts focusing in that area as well, we will probably, who knows, include it in a future version.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Apoorv, is that we're focusing on marketing, or we'd say more broadly customer experience or customer facing activities and platforms. When we look at agents here, there's certainly a big story around agents at the infrastructure level, at intra-enterprise. Certainly consumer agents are out there in the world. But to Apoorv's point, if anyone who is a subscriber to this stream wants us to cover a vendor, we always add it. So it's you out there who are MarTech leaders who are telling us who to cover, and we're always excited to add new vendors if it has value for you. So with that, I know we've run a little bit over here. Thanks for sticking around with us. A lot more to say on this topic, but if you're a Real Story Group subscriber and you want to have a private briefing or a brown bag with your team, always happy to indulge that. In the meantime, look forward to further webinars, including an interactive webinar, as Scott mentioned, on the actually benchmarking your AI effectiveness or your AI maturity. So always great to spend time with you. For Scott Dill and Tony Byrne, so long, but so long just for now. See you again. Bye.